Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you on Tag Thursday. I don't think I did a tag on Tuesday. Uh, but there are quite a few. There are quite a few tags out there that I want to do. I'm running a backlog once again, so I thought I'd fire up the rad pad. I call it that because of this gumdrop rubber coating that's all over it. It's absolutely wonderful. Not only is it easy to grip, but it's really thick. I could throw this thing across the room and it wouldn't hurt the iPad. This is the summer school book tag, which I was tagged by Hannah at Hannah's Books, but it was created by Doris at All D Books, and that is some BookTube royalty right there, because both those channels are fantastic, and it's all about summer school. So let's see what kind of trouble we can get into. Question number 1: language arts. Tell us about a book you were assigned to read in school. I've been assigned many books to read in school. One that came to mind was Crime and Punishment. Because it was the first time that I read Crime and Punishment, and this was a very long time ago. And I complained liberally that how long it takes to get for the thing to get up and running. It would seem to me for the thing to get up and running, and I always remember that first impression when I'm rereading Crime and Punishment, because now to me the lead up to the death of the old woman in Crime and Punishment is more enjoyable than the payoff. So now the early parts of the book seem more enjoyable to me in terms of just the psychological atmosphere building. But I was assigned to read it. I did all of my assigned reading, unlike many of the other students in school. Question number 2 is math. When will I ever use this again? Share a book in which the characters need math skills. The first book that came to mind, the character who needs math skills, is me. It's not a novel, it's nonfiction. And it's a book that I've praised on this channel before many times. It's by Philip Ording. It's called 99 Variations on a Proof. Came to me out of nowhere, no warning. I didn't know what to make of it. The hypothetical question here, when will I ever use this again, is a question that I asked many times when I was suffering through math in school. I'm not very good at math. I don't think any of us, back when I was a student, anticipated that computers would one day rule the world, and they do now. Now math is more essential than ever, and all of us have to deal with more of it in one way or another, whether it's coded by apps or not, than we ever thought we would. But even so, I have forgotten trigonometry and algebra and math, arithmetic and all that sort of stuff. I don't use it much at all, especially since, as vital as it's become for modern day life, the technological elements of modern day life have made it possible for those technological elements to do the math for you. I've lost count of how many times I've had Google simply do arithmetic for me, because I don't know how to do it. It'd take me forever. To divide 14 into 270 would take me forever. I don't know that I even remember how to do that. But now I just punch it up on Google. But 99 Variations on a Proof is exactly what the cover says. Variations. A proof is derived 99 different ways: classical ways, economic ways, literary ways, purely mathematical ways, all sorts of different variations, most of which went over my head. But over time, when you're reading the book, one proof after another, I started to sort of gradually absorb the book's vocabulary without understanding it. Just sort of gradually, I don't know how to describe the experience. I've read this book many times now. I think it's utterly fascinating. It could be that the process that I'm describing, or trying to describe, was the whole discipline of mathematics trying to wrap its way back inside my head. I don't know if that's true. I don't think I was any more mathematically literate when I finished the book than when I started it, the first time or the second time or the third time. But I loved it. I thought it was just fascinating. I imagine somebody who really knows math or even really knows formal logic would like it even more. One way or another. That's the first one that came to mind. Then question number 3 is science. What was the last science-related book you read? It's by George Dyson. It's called Analogia, and I don't think it's out yet. I think it's a forthcoming book for the summer or for the fall. It's his meditation on AI, basically, on the singularity. His meditation on how close we are, what realistically we can expect from machines getting more and more complicated, learning to complicate themselves without human interaction. learning things without humans inputting that information, and maybe having preferences or coming to decisions without humans programming any of that. It's not, in other words, it's not new ground that the book is writing, but I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I'm always up for reading things like that. I'm always curious to know the latest the stories that of what advanced software is doing without being told to do it. That those sorts of things are utterly fascinating to me. Then question number 4 is social studies. Share a book from your TBR that is translated or deals with government. This is not technically from my TBR because I just read it. We'll read it again. I think it's in the future as well. I don't think we're up on its publication date yet. Or maybe the publication date has passed and I'm just blurring it out. It's a Trump book, but it's by a significant author, much like Victor Davis Hanson's book, The Case for Trump, was a Trump book by a significant author. So even if I weren't already decided to read these Trump books, I wouldn't miss a book by Victor Davis Hanson. I might consider missing a book now. I always talk about the bank account of goodwill that an author has for me, and that they have to do something bad to decrease that bank account. And The Case for Trump was not only bad, but insulting. A genuinely stupid and dangerous book by a really good historian. So his next book, if God help me if it's a Trump book, I don't know what I'll do. I will just lose an author. That's what I'll do. I'll just lose an author. But no matter what it is, I will be reading it through the lens of having read The Case for Trump. A just unaccountably horrible book that was had so many glaring mistakes in it, so many glaring errors of argument, that Hanson had to know about it. And so it's not only bad, but in bad faith. And the book that I have in mind here is by Jeffrey Toobin, who has written a shelf full of really good books. And it's True Crimes and Misdemeanors. It's all about investigating Donald Trump. It's all about investigating him for crimes. Because we need, I guess, an in-depth, detailed, months-long, trench-coat-wearing, deep-throat-using investigation when this guy confesses to his crimes on the South Lawn of the White House. No investigation is necessary. For books like this are only trying to cash in on Donald Trump's name, on the fact that if you write a book about Donald Trump, it will sell. They're only trying to use him, in other words, and he is evil. You can't touch pitch without being defiled. The true investigations, True Crimes and Misdemeanors, tracking down documents, follow the money, is a thing that's been all over social media today, because today a New York court ruled that it could compel Trump to release his tax returns and it could view them. None of those things matter. None of them matter at all. Because this president is shielded by the most supine and disgusting Republican Party that has ever existed in the entire history of the United States. This president confesses to his crimes openly. He doesn't believe that he is capable of doing anything wrong, much less illegal. He's never been called to account for anything, so he thinks that if somebody comes out with, resistance to him, he'll just declare bankruptcy on the presidency or something like that. He declares these things openly. It doesn't require investigation. If your subject confesses, you don't have to investigate. What is required is for the Republicans in the U.S. Senate to say, you're out of here. All it takes is for the Republicans in the Senate to send a page boy over to the Democrats in the House of Representatives and say, impeach him again, and this time you have our full support. We'll get rid of him. They had a chance to get rid of this guy. And they didn't call witnesses. They didn't even have a trial. It was just, if you say he's guilty, well, no. You're not on our team, so we say he's innocent. And we don't have that, and we're never going to have that. So books like this are automatically infuriating, but I read it anyway because Toobin can be good. He's not good in this book, but at least he's not outright lying in this book the way Victor Davis Hanson was. So it's an awful low bar. It's a terrible, terrible thing, the mania of cashing in on Trump, of using him to get yourself a New York Times best-selling book. It's a terrible thing that mania has reduced the bar, has lowered the bar on people, scholars like Jeffrey Toobin, to the point where all you can say is, well, I guess he doesn't lie. Anyway, oh my. Let's move on, shall we? Question number 5 is Exploratories. Which category of extra non-core classes did you take the most of in high school? I realized that my raven hair, my bee-sting lips, my pillowy pecs, and my thin dancer's waist might lead you to forget the fact that I am as old as dirt. But we didn't have non-core exploratives in high school. Okay, we didn't have them, so I didn't have the luxury of taking any of them. Good Lord, you people. So let's just move on to question number 6. Common Core. Share a good pairing of a fiction and a non-fiction book. I have one that's been on my mind in the last few months. It's been on my mind to the point where I think that a reread is in order. The non-fiction is P.N. Furbank's great biography of E.M. Forster. Big, thick brick of a thing that is just terrific. Fantastic reading experience, fantastic examination, and the final word on handling the sources. I just loved it. Just the definitive biography of E.M. Forster, the great novelist. And I read Danon Galgut's Arctic Summer, which Europa Editions brought out, which is a novel about one incident, one period in Forster's life. And I reviewed the book. I wasn't very generous with it. I reviewed it. One of the main points I made in my review is that this is an almost word-for-word transcription of a legitimate biography of Forster during that period. So why bother to read a novel? That made me concentrate on the things the novel does that aren't in the biography. And just in general, I think for the review and for my response, maybe at the time I wasn't concentrating so much on whether or not I enjoyed Arctic Summer, which is a valid element in a review, and I don't think I did. I don't think I concentrated enough on that. So I've been sort of itching to reread Arctic Summer, and I'm pretty sure I don't have a copy anymore, so I might have to ask Europa Editions for a copy of it. But that was a non-fiction and fiction pairing that immediately came to mind, and I want to try that and see if maybe maybe my reading of Arctic Summer has shifted. Although it could be that I will reread it, still be meh about it, and just want to reread Furbank again. That could easily be. Then question number 7 is research. What was the last topic that inspired you to seek out books so you could read up on it? And this is another forthcoming book. This is by Peter Baker and Susan Glasser, and it is The Man Who Ran Washington. It's a biography, mainly a political biography of James Baker, Jim Baker III, who was a gray eminence in Washington for 3 or 4 presidential administrations, was the heart and soul of the Reagan administration, and was consulted by a whole bunch of people on both sides of the aisle for decades. And I have The Politics of Diplomacy, his book, which I've always loved. I think it's really, really good. It's whoever wrote it, I don't think Jim Baker wrote it, but whoever wrote it really captured the way he is, that sort of cat on the windowsill effect that he has on conversations and whatnot. But I also have been, in the wake of that book, of reading The Man Who Ran Washington, I have been rereading studies of the Reagan administration, studies of the George H.W. Bush administration, watching where Baker pops up in those books and how he does. So that's just standard stuff. I want to write about the Baker book when it comes out. And that's just the standard idea of what I do. If I've got a nonfiction work coming, I'll prep the ground. Or if I don't, if I'm pulled in and I read the book first, then I will do the follow-up reading afterwards. You want to know all that stuff. I do anyway. I want to have all of that at my fingertips if I write a review of this book, and I want to write a review of this book. So then question number 8 is, what subject area would you teach if you were a teacher? This automatically reminded me of when I was teaching, of when I did teach, when I taught basic literature. The classroom multi-week, multi-month equivalent of our Western Canon Starter Kit. Or mythology, comparative mythology, where we did basically the same thing. We just go through the famous mythologies, the less famous ones, talk about common themes running throughout them and great stories and whatnot. And also writing. I've taught writing a huge number of times, and I thought about all of those things and then realized that in 2020 I couldn't possibly do it. I couldn't teach any of those things. Because, maybe if I'm teaching literature, then maybe my syllabus is not representative enough. with a total disregard for whether or not the books are any good. No, we need to see representation. And if you somehow manage to get a syllabus by your dean that isn't representative, your students will sue you, and they'll win. They'll claim mental distress, psychological distress. Same thing with mythologies. Good Lord, can you imagine? Can you imagine what a professor now would have to go through, the hoops that a professor would have to go through now to avoid being canceled in order to teach the mythology of any ethnic group other than his own? There's no way that you could do it. The first student with a 30,000 social media following that accused you of racism or colonialism, and you'd be out on your ear. The university would fire you without even a hearing. And probably you'd be sued after that. And writing? Oh my God. Writing in some ways may be the worst of all. Just recently, there was a story that came out. It was written up in Publishers Weekly, where an author wrote a book about a specific culture of which she was not a member, and she was called out on social media and canceled herself. She didn't even wait for the mob to show up at her door. She said, "I'm returning my advance. I'm canceling my book contract. I beg." I mean, she wrote, I will return to my writing and try to be better. I will try to learn better how to be more sensitive about these things. But the wording of her apology was as clear as day. The wording of her apology was, "Please don't kill me. Please don't literally kill me. Don't brigade every employer, even bagging groceries at the grocery store, who might ever even think of hiring me to make sure that they don't. I need money in order to buy food and in order to pay rent to keep a roof over my head. Please don't kill me or force me to kill myself. Please don't cancel my existence on Earth because I did this." We'll never know if she did a good job of it. God forbid. That question is off the table completely. That a writer might do a good job of imagining something that they didn't actually experience? No. If you imagine something that you didn't actually experience, you are culturally appropriating it from someone, somewhere. And it doesn't matter how good a job you do. You're Satan. You're worse than Hitler. I wouldn't want to teach any of these subjects in any, in anything like the modern environment. I wouldn't want to do it. So it's not a question of, the question was, what subject areas would you teach if you were a teacher? It's not so much the subject areas, it's the era. I wouldn't so much pick the subject areas as I would pick the era. The 1980s. That's when I would teach. I could do a passable job teaching a whole bunch of subject areas, but not in 2020. Not ever in 2020. No way. No, in 1980, I could do a very good job with all of those subjects, especially writing. But not now. No, God forbid. No. And then question number 9 is, share a photo from your school days. But photography was developed in the 1820s, so I'm afraid it came too late for my school days. No photos. And then question number 10 is, tag some fellow lifelong learners. And I have a bunch of people here. I don't know if they've done this tag or want to do it. Olive from the book Olive, Jason Harrigan, Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads, Sean D. Standfast, and also Sean the Book Maniac. Dee Dee at Brown Girl Reading, I haven't tagged you in quite some time. Lucy the Reader, I don't think I've tagged you in months. And also, and what great pleasure it gives me to do it, Lindsay Ray, the erstwhile Queen Bee of BookTube, has returned to BookTube after a 4-year absence. That's a cause for joy. I'll leave a link just in case some of you might be newcomers and not even remember that she had a channel. So I don't know if she's doing tags. I don't know how many of these people do tags. I know some of my cronies in the OGBG might do a tag if I ask them to, but if this tag interests you, whether I've named you or not, feel free to do it, because these are interesting questions. And I want, of course, to thank Hannah for tagging me. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.